Hi everyone, my name is Tammy, and today I'll be talking about driving bug bounties using Snowflake. So in my presentation, I'll be diving into what bug bounties are, key performance indicators that determine the success of our bug bounty program, and how to leverage metrics to impact vulnerability management. A little bit about myself. So my name is Tammy. I'm a security engineer on the threat detection team at Snowflake. For super background context, I didn't study computers. I studied exercise biology in school. And realizing I didn't want to go into physical therapy, my first job out of school was doing customer support for medical devices. And in that sense, I was also troubleshooting computers. So naturally, I expanded to the world of IT and troubleshooting anything with a cable, essentially. And since then, I've gained exposures to different teams, especially the security teams, and I was really eager to learn more about how controls are enforced and how compliance works with like the security teams to work together so that we can better protect the product and our company. So that's how I got to where I am today. On the side, outside of work, I really like to hike and go backpacking and trail running. Fun fact, during the pandemic, I started a monthly food tasting. And it's a little bit of a controversial topic, but in terms of fries, Burger King won as the best fries, and that was a blind tasting. So we'll start with what is a bug bounty. I'm going to read out the definition that HackerOne put out there. I think it was really well written. A bug bounty is a monetary reward given to ethical hackers for successfully discovering and reporting a vulnerability or bug to the application's developer. Bug bounty programs allow companies to leverage the hacker community to improve their system security posture over time continuously. So a little bit of a history here. Way back in 1995, Netscape was actually the first company to launch a bug bounty program where they offered cash reward for security bugs in their Netscape Navigator. I thought that was really interesting, and it's come a long way. Like I'll be explaining later, HackerOne is a platform that we use to manage the bug bounty program. And I think it's a great way to use skills to find vulnerabilities. You can only hire so many engineers, and you want to know people who know your product from within, from with outside, and what they're looking for. And I think it's a great way to do that. For a little more context too, in terms of bug bounty programs, so there are such things as private programs and public programs. For private programs, that means it's closed off, it's by invitation only, and the invites are sent to the group of researchers depending on what platform you use. And you can regulate it by saying, like, only hackers with a certain reputation are allowed to submit reports to your program. And that really regulates, I think, in terms of volume, what you're ready for and what you want to see. Public programs, it's open to all hackers, and the volume is a little more unpredictable. I'd say volume is also unpredictable in private programs as well. It's just you can control, I guess, a little bit more volume in terms of how many people you invite. For public program, my recommendation definitely is to have all of your internal, external processes streamlined, that you're ready for having your program be open, so you keep a healthy relationship with the people who also submit reports to you as well. But it definitely opens up more doors in that respect. So what is HackerOne? For those of you who don't know, it's a platform for bug bounty programs and vulnerability coordination. And so they really provide the platform where they have the tooling for researchers to anonymously submit reports to your company, and you can, pay out the rewards to those researchers for the reports through their platform. And it also provides metrics as well. They offer other services too, such as like security assessments and pen tests. HackerOne is not the only platform out there. There are other platforms out there such as BugCrowd. In terms of open source, it's Open Bug Bounty. I personally myself have not worked with either of those. But if you have any recommendations, definitely feel free to comment and let everyone else know. So when I started revamping, I guess, the Bug Bounty program, my first thoughts were like, we have to determine the key performance indicators. I think that's like first and foremost, the first thing I guess like you should do is understand what is important to leadership and management, the product security teams, corporate security teams, whatever security team you have internally. For us, it was important to identify these KPIs also depending on the resources you have, right? Depending on your company size and your team, you only have so many resources and you have to prioritize accordingly. For Snowflake, we wanted high impact findings, right? And to know, to get these types of reports, there's like the realization that you have to have like an engaging program. It's kind of like having all your ducks in a row to actually go live with something, right? And it's the same with the bug bounty program. You want to make sure all their ducks are in a row internally, so that the researchers that submit reports to you also have the best experience possible. They are also the customers that you cater to. So going down this list of key performance indicators, so time to first response, we had a target of 1 day, right? And this is also where we actually leverage an additional service that HackerOne provides. They have a triage service. It is an additional service. I definitely want to note that, where you leverage the HackerOne team to first response. It's like you have a thank you for your report, and then they go on to have an SLA on their side, right? Since it's a service that we pay for, to validate the report. Definitely one thing I actually wanted to bring up here is that these are targets, right? They're not SLAs, and so they aren't agreements that we necessarily make to researchers to do. It is our internal target that we aim to have a healthy program. So for time to triage, getting it to the appropriate team to fix, that would be 2 days. And for having time to resolution, it depends on the criticality of the report. Again, this depends on the internal policies that you have within your company. We try to we align these guidelines with the same as we would with any other vulnerability or finding for these target dates. The time to bounty, I think, is really important. When I was doing research on other programs and reading a lot of blog posts on how other companies manage their bug bounty programs, having this time, a more speedy time to bounty is important because researchers, they want to get paid. And sometimes you don't really know their situation, but it could be a primary source of income. If you know that a report or finding is valid, why not pay out, right? Why delay? Why wait? So I think it's definitely important as someone who's managing a bug bounty program to make sure that once the report has been validated, to make sure the researcher gets paid. You're definitely welcome to ask questions. I think that's really great. The awesome part of having this platform is you can ask, maybe how did they find this vulnerability? Good things to follow up on, and things to build and improve internally will help from that knowledge. Again, for impacted findings, we wanted, of course, everyone wants higher and critical findings to come back to them, and low and mediums. And I'll dive a little bit more deeper into those numbers in the next slides. And there's such a thing as like a hacker acceptance rate. If you're in a private program, just because invites are sent out doesn't necessarily mean that the researchers will accept doing research into your program. It's ultimately obviously up to them. And so it's kind of like a sale at a store. You want to look attractive. And so thinking about what makes a program attractive as well. All right. So how do we measure the bug bounty program performance? You probably heard me mention earlier, I mentioned like keeping a healthy program. And I thought about like how do you measure that? How do you measure what a healthy program looks like? And so I put together essentially a health score. And this health score is based off of 3 metrics that were identified by leadership as most important to us. And so there's volume, accuracy, and impact. Although they're all important, they're not all equally important, which is why they have different weights. And so it makes up 20% volume, 50% accuracy, and 30% impact. Volume is at 20% because even though, of course, the more you want a lot of reports, if half of them are not valid, it doesn't really matter, right? So accuracy is definitely the heaviest weight there. And then impact, that is the critical high, medium, low impact of the severity of the finding. So also more important to us than volume, but not quite as important as accuracy. And definitely, as you think about maybe your program and how you would want to calculate a health score, these numbers could look very differently. It really depends on, what's important to your management in your company. So for volume, I'm going to go back to it. It's a little more straightforward. We took the number of, submitted reports. If you're doing a report on the past 3 months or past year, the time depends on the time period you want to report your metrics on. But yeah, taking a look at that number over the average submitted reports per quarter for the industry benchmark. And we were able to use the data that HackerOne provided actually, and their average submitted reports for our industry benchmark was 21. So calculating volume over that number. Accuracy, pretty straightforward too. You take the actual resolved reports and the informative reports and calculate that over the total submitted reports. So we're basically filtering out any reports that aren't valid. We actually took into account informative reports because although it may not be something that we action on, it is a good to know that this is something that people report as a finding to us. And then again, impact. Similar to the overall health score weight, critical, high, medium, low are not all the same weight. The expectation is that, criticals are going to be difficult to find. So you're not going to get as many critical reports. There are a lot of mediums and lows. And those are the percentages that you want to put the weight on for impact. These percentages are also based off of the average quarterly industry benchmark. All right. So once you have your KPIs and your health score scored away, what do those internal processes look like so you can get to a healthy program? And for us, we have, I know I'm sorry, like this is probably a little bit hard to read. If you full screen, I think it's a little bit better. But having internal processes is really, really important, right? Because if you have a large volume of reports coming in and researchers aren't getting paid out, they're left open, right? It impacts their hacker reputation, their scoring within the hacker community, which won't make them happy, right? They want to have a good reputation so that they continue doing well in other programs as well. So you want to make sure your internal processes are definitely streamlined. So starting from the top, you have the HackerOne report submitted, and for us, we have HackerOne triage service, as I mentioned earlier, to help with the initial time to response and the original initial validation of the report. On top of that, we actually have another layer of validation, right? Because our team knows our product best. HackerOne can also can only validate, I guess, so much. If it applies to our actual product, is up to us internally. So at Snowflake, we actually have separate teams. We have the product security team and the corporate security team. So corporate security team being the ones that manage the very external facing things like the website, right? So any vulnerabilities that we find there would go to corporate security. Any vulnerabilities with product security with Snowflake itself would go to the product security team. And it's definitely important to make sure you communicate with, both the leaders and the teams like that you have that will eventually be helping fix triaging and remediating these issues to know these are your processes, right? I think communication is so important so that everyone is on the same page as to what you need next. What is their input and what is the expected output? So once the corporate and product security team reproduces and validates the finding, once validated, definitely move on to rewarding the researcher their bounty. And we'll dive a little deeper into like what that reward will look like. And then like if you have like any like findings or vulnerability playbook, definitely initiate that and have the appropriate ticket for the teams there. And if it really is like a big vulnerability, loop in the incident response team. That's part of I'd say blue teaming, right? Like we want to make sure that not like the vulnerability hasn't been exploited. From there, we only close the reports once the vulnerability has actually been fixed. I'm going to pause right there. I know I've said a lot. Does anyone have any questions so far? And yes, and our friends in compliance, everyone should be in the loop. All right. So again, I know I dived a lot into like the nitty gritty of the processes, but the 4 big steps to triage, validate, reward, and eventually resolve in terms of streamlining your internal processes. All right, now onto the fun stuff. How much money to reward? So one of the great things that I love about HackerOne is that they have, data on their internal platforms. They understand, where, depending on the industry, what that benchmark data looks like. And it can be difficult to start a bug bounty program if you don't have any money, any budget for this. So this is definitely one of the things I use to drive that, to come up to leadership and say like, hi, like we need money for this bug bounty program. Because if we want to get reports and findings on our product that we want to know about using the hacker community, we should reward accordingly. And I know like not every company has the resources to do that. Alternatives definitely are swag. You can send out, stickers, hats, shirts, but definitely, think about the type of findings you'll receive and how that will help your company in the future. What value are you're placing on that, right? If you're like placing a hat on the same value as like remote code execution, it's a hard one. It's a tough one. I think researchers, want to feel like they are making an impact and helping you and your company and your product out. So definitely, understand like what the annual budget plan is for security, and show this data in regards to bounty bounty values from other companies, and the benefits of those previous reports, right? Like there's a lot of information online about companies and their bug bounties. And so in discussing those budget allocations with management, I think it will really be a win and helpful for you and the team and all of the security teams. So you can also create your reward standards using other bug bounty programs out there. Airbnb has their program that's listed on the HackerOne website, and Amazon as well. You can Google Google's bug bounty programs. And so, like I said, like the amount that you pay out is really up to you as a company, how much you want to pay out for. Definitely, it has my recommendation is that it makes sense for your company, where you're at in the company's growth, for those values. You want to remain competitive. If you feel like your company is on the same size and value as like a big company, then bring that as the case up to management. It's like you say we are like so and so company, Amazon, Google, then why are we not paying out as such? Or if you're a smaller company, look for another similar sized company and see what they're doing with their program. Certainly having that benchmark data really to line and baseline what you will have as for your bug bounty program. Any questions so far before I move on to metrics? All right. So how to use metrics to identify trends and patterns. Now that we have, let's say, like if a running bug bounty program, you want to have this metrics available so management can understand like what you're doing with it, right? And so for what I did internally, of course, use the HackerOne API and connected it with, ingested the data into Snowflake to build dashboards in Snowflake. It might be a little overkill for what I wanted to do, but of course, like we had to use our own product. Some alternatives, the HackerOne also has their own dashboard, which is really great, that shows metrics. You can use Postgres. I haven't tried using that or with Excel or G Sheet, but definitely possible to do as well. I think for our use case, we just want to really personalize the data. So, we're able to use our own tooling to visualize what we want in a manner that really highlights our product as well. So this is kind of a screenshot of what the data would look like if you want to show trends and patterns using and visualizing Snowflake. And this a disclaimer here: the data here was modified for the purpose of this presentation. So, please don't go screaming to the world like Snowflake has so-and-so vulnerabilities. This is definitely just for example purposes. So once you ingest your data, you can build out visualizations for your metrics. Show what your key performance indicators look like over time. Of the reports, which asset has the most findings and the current state of those findings. Like do you have maybe the highest volume of reports being the website? And I think that makes sense, right? It's public facing and easy to start with, rather than maybe if the product itself is more complicated, you won't see as many reports on that. But having that data is really valuable, right? Because if you want to see it trend towards, trend your way essentially to what you want to see, exactly how to identify that and why and where. And continuing on, what volume looks like over time. And if you can see at the bottom, I have a notable events timeline, and I thought that was pretty neat to add because, you might not see the trend for just such a short period of time, but over a longer period of time, you might be able to identify such trends. So it's like, if there's an event for you, message all the researchers and notify them that, hey, we increased our rewards, or we've added more assets, like check it out, let us know what you think. And then you'll see, like, does my messages make a difference? Do researchers take a look more and we get more findings? Or maybe your company, goes public, or, there is any public event maybe that draws attention, and researchers want to take a look and submit findings to you. Then I think it's really interesting to see that data, and I'm sure it's interesting for management to see as well. All right. So now that we have all that, we have the health score, the KPIs, and the metrics, we can tie that all together to tell our vulnerability story. Again, this data was made up. We do not have this perfect score that I've made up here, but we'll start at the top. So at the top, you have a high level data such as like the health score, and as you go down the dashboard, you can drill down to the more granular metrics. I think that's what really tells the story, right? In a really like coherent, beautiful manner to management of why we do what we do in terms of bug bounty, having the bug bounty program in the first place. And so you start with, this is our health score, and these are how many reports we've received, and this is how many of those reports, how many were the percentage that were accurate. You can display how much of the budget that you were given has been spent so far, and definitely depending on what you want to see, you can drill down even further, right? Like how much each report bounty was given for each report. Here I have the percentage of impact of submissions, right? Like we see a very typical spread here, with medium and lows being higher than critical and highs. And then the KPIs on the bottom, right? So we have like, what is our HackerOne triage SLA? Is that being met? The time to triage, the time to resolution. I think that really better helps understand like where you're at in your program. If there's feedback given from the researchers as well as to how you're doing. If I think it lines up, right? If you get great feedback, you're doing well, and then the numbers are reflective of that, and you're getting good reports, that's the key that you're doing well, and it's to keep going. And it's also valuable to have if there's room for improvement, as there always is. So for the researcher policy, I've talked about driving bug bounty programs, and so now I'll briefly talk about the external researcher facing policy. And so this is the page where researchers can go to read up about, what assets are in scope for your program, what is most important to you, how much money you're giving out as bounties, and for what severity reports. It's funny, I put here, the more the merrier versus, less is better. I find this to be personally a really difficult balance. You want to have a lot of guidelines and messages out there to protect your company, and how much, how flexible you're willing to be, essentially. But you want to be flexible at the same time, so you can give the researchers the flexibility to play around and look into what is potentially really vulnerable about either your product or your company. Having those rules and guidelines definitely helps give them guidance. But when you have so much also on your front facing page, it's like, who's actually reading that, right? Definitely have a coordinated disclosure policy, list what's out of scope. We've also give like examples of severities. Sometimes you can run into problems with that, right? If you say something is a high severity finding, but if applied to or found in a test environment, but not production, what does that become actually, right? I think that it calls for definitely discussion, and the rewards given for that. I think in my experience, is like this is not set in stone, right? Your guidelines you can update, you can change, and I think it's really it's been really interesting process and journey to see how that evolves. It always seems that you're adding more and more, because it doesn't seem clear if like researchers are reporting or submitting reports that aren't quite maybe what you're looking for. So definitely really important to note there, what you want to put in. And definitely this was in a lot of collaboration with our security compliance team and legal team to know what we were allowed to even have as the policy in the first place. Any questions? Yeah, I agree, Katie. Recognizing discovery security defects is definitely important. All right, moving on. So wrapping up, I know I've jumped a little bit into talking about like key metrics, key performance indicators. Key takeaways are definitely, from my experience, streamlining those internal processes. I can't stress that enough. Right? Like it's like if you have like one person talking to another person who's not even on the same line as you, having your teams collaborate and work together to understand from beginning to end what are the expectations. Like I mentioned, what is the input and output? Then it will. Then the river can run smooth, right? So you want to make sure the triaging aspect, the validation, the rewarding, and the resolution, everyone is on the same page for, and everyone understands what is expected there and the time frame, right? What is the expected time frame? And if it is expected to take longer, maybe that's something that you would want to publish on your guidance page to researchers, that it does take your team a little bit longer. I think if you're transparent about that, like the expectation is then clear, that it may take a little longer for them to receive a bounty or get validation, or if you have any questions there. Metrics is also super important. Being part of a data company, right? You know, it's everything. You can, it's so powerful if you have this data, right? In just the bug bounty alone, you have the data available to you. You put a value on it. You're measuring it. You know, I think like by having the health score and visualizing that, you can really drive the program forward. You can drive having bigger bounties, which means researchers who will spend more time to actually sit and look at your product, to play around with it, to report those vulnerabilities with you. If you take it seriously, your management will take it seriously, and so will the researchers. It really, I think it makes a huge difference. You come with, you know, to anyone you talk to about the bug bounty program with solid evidence, you know, and using that benchmark data. It's hard to argue if you have data like to back up your source, right? And then yeah, using all of that to get stakeholder buy-in. So, you know, talk. One of the things I had a really great privilege was to talk to multiple people within the security realm in our org and also outside of our org about the bug bounty program. So then you have the buy-ins from not only like, you know, your immediate managers, but also higher up, the VP of security and the CIO as well. This is just some of my reference from the pictures. I got approval to post. And that wraps up my presentation. So thank you very much to everyone for attending. If you have any questions, you can message me on LinkedIn if you don't want to post here, but definitely post in the chat and I can answer as well since we have a lot of time. Did Bug Bounty also help improve telemetry in companies' detections metrics? That's a really good question. I think that, I didn't tie them together, but I think that is super valuable. Part of the bug bounty program is, right, like ownership of the program itself and where it sits with and interacts with the different security teams. So, sure, you bring up a really good point, Jill. We have the other teams to help validate and remediate, but are we also looking like really understanding how researchers are finding these vulnerabilities and seeing if we are asking them to get tested afterwards, right? Like, I think that's important to make sure, similar to like, right, red teaming, purple teaming, you want to test those findings to make sure those are remediated. But at the same time, like, as researchers are doing testing within your environment, hopefully you have like a separate environment, right, not on your production instance, for the researchers to be able to do that. That is their data showing up. Definitely in our case, we have been able to find, okay, like, this is the researcher doing so and so on this instance. So yeah, I think it does help improve telemetry in a company's detection metrics. Can we participate in Snowflake's bug bounty program? Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, so Snowflake currently has a private bug bounty program. And so it is by invite only at the moment. But if you do find a vulnerability, you are welcome to submit it to Snowflake. I don't have it right up in front of me, but if you do like a quick Google search of Snowflake vulnerability bug bounty, it will redirect you to where you can submit your report, and then we're happy to invite you to the program if it's a valid report. All right. Well, thank you again, everyone, for attending my talk. Look forward to discussing more about bug bounties or anything else with you all. Thank you.